Sasha grabs Heiss in a huge hug right in the middle of the hall, cheering because she finally got the sword. He's totally down, thinking this is a huge win for their future. But then we flash back to a super sad day in the rain. The flashback keeps rolling as a crying Heist makes a massive promise. He swears that they're going to become the strongest ones around. That way, they can save everyone and make sure nobody else ever. Back in the present, an old official calls Heist up for his turn and explains that every 12-year-old gets a unique power called a blessing from a sacred text. He touches the book, and it suddenly blasts out a crazy bright light, the pages flipping super fast until it lands on Weapon Master. The glow fades, and Geis asks what skill he got, but he's totally stumped when Heist says Weapon Master. Fast forward 2 years, and an older sacred Heist is struggling up a rocky mountain path, gasping for air while lugging a massive back. Reynolds, the vice leader, who's usually a total chicken, turns around with a chill smile. Sasha watches the whole thing go down from afar, but Reynolds just turns to her and says, "They gotta keep moving." High asks for a quick break, and with a tired sigh, Sasha agrees to stop for 30 minutes before they hit the road again. As she stayed silent, Reynolds shouted her name. Reynolds kept his voice low as he warned her that this failure might kill their chances of ranking up, and while she stayed quiet, her eyes, before she can even say a word, Heist drags himself up with a weird smile, insisting that lugging the bags is the only way he can help the team. He watched the others from the sidelines, feeling that same old frustration bubbling up, because even though it had been 2 years since he got his blessing, and he'd built, the official records showed a massive gap, because while Sasha hit the Elite A rank on her own, her squad, Sacred, was still stuck. Just as the group gets ready to move, their big armored tank gives High a friendly pat and tells him to stop stressing. Sasha noticed he was totally stressed and looked back worried. Then Reynolds walked over with some cider, saying he looked straight down the path and sounded super confident as he told them they were going to be just fine. His words didn't help her feel any better, so Reynolds kept pushing for an answer until she finally looked up. With her mind made up, the team finally knew their next move. The squad stood right in front. He watches the squad get ready to head into the cave and nervously asks Sasha if he's... The squad's whole strategy is built around these powers called blessings, and we learn that the Typhoon Blessing lets you teleport, which is the secret weapon they need. Reynolds explains that Philip's Sage Blessing lets him use all kinds of awesome support magic instead of just basic. A massive Queen Cobra suddenly stops them in their tracks, lunging with crazy. She's not even trying to block, and instead, she's already moving her hand to strike back. She points her sword right at the monster, looking totally fearless as she shouts that it's going down right here. Watching from the fight kicks off as Sasha flies through the air with her sword raised for a massive hit, showing everyone. The giant snake hits back hard, smashing their main shield to pieces. With his main defense gone, Reynolds is totally panicking and screaming for Heist because he thinks he's toast, while the rest of the squad gets swarmed and trapped. He's totally focused on his friend, fighting for their life. He has no idea there's something creeping up right behind him. A giant snake with glowing eyes. Right as the giant snake lunges, he flashes back to a time he apologized to his team after a crazy fight, telling them he just wanted to step up. Sasha totally snapped and called him a useless clown for trying to help. And while the rest of the crew talked about splitting the loot, he was just left. He just stood there, looking totally lost while the group talked. And when Piazzolla asked about the rest of the loot, Sasha just brushed it off, saying that while Piazzolla's staring him down to hurry up, he finds a thick mystery book and quickly shoves it into his bag before she notices. Once he was finally alone, he checked out the book and found drawings of a weird gun called a desert eagle and some strange symbols, and suddenly he tried to show the squad what he found when they met up, but they were already geared up to leave. Reynolds called his hope was totally crushed in a second, and before he could even say a word, Sasha coldly told him he was totally flawed and begged Sasha, asking if she really forgot the promise they made to each other. She turned away with a cold look, and even though she still remembered him, her team was finally hitting air rank. So she slammed a bag of cash on the table as his final pay, telling him she's only looking for the strongest teammates and he just doesn't make. He stood there in total shock as Reynolds tossed a bag of coins onto a barrel, giving a half-hearted apology and some cash. The vice leader leaned in with a smug grin, put a hand on his shoulder, and he told them straight up that heists were officially off the table for their crew. Heist finally spoke up, looking past Reynolds at the group and asking if he'd been waiting for this. Before anyone can even answer, Phillips snaps and starts shouting that they can't just kick Heist out. Phillips kept arguing and questioning Reynolds' logic, demanding to know what would happen. Reynolds completely ignored the freakout, turned his icy stare back to Heist, and he tosses a bag of cash onto the table as a peace offering. But Heist just stands behind him and shuts it down, saying he doesn't need the money. Heist suddenly snapped, spinning around to smack the money away while yelling that he didn't need their cash. He shouted that he was leaving. His eyes were burning with determination as he swore he'd never be a quitter like Sasha. He screamed that she only used her teammates to win, leaving Sasha totally frozen as his words. She's just staring into space when Reynolds steps up and calmly calls her name. All while Heist is still in the back, he knelt down and asked if she was sure about this, telling her it was totally fine as long as. Later that night under the moon, Reynolds told her it was okay if she hated him for what he did, but Sasha just whispered his name. 2 months have passed with him flying solo, and Heist is honestly just exhausted as he lets out a heavy sigh. He's walking through the crowded hall with a massive basket on his back when an adventurer spots him and starts. You try to ignore it, but the trash talk follows you everywhere as the other adventurers mock the guy who got booted from the legendary party just to pick flowers by himself. Hearing them talk trash made him grit his teeth and ball up his fist, wondering if they really thought he was just ruining their rep or if they. 2 sets of footsteps echo across the wooden pier in perfect sync, one from flashy armored boots and the other. Sasha suddenly signals for everyone to stop, catching Heist and the rest of the crew, Reynolds, Piazzolla, and Robin, complete. He's totally stunned as she orders him to head south to the Desara Kingdom and find the damp lands to hunt for the white herbs needed to make recovery. He's totally shocked by the massive amount of herbs she's asking for, but while he's still trying to process it, Reynolds smirks at Sasha, wondering if Heist will actually find the herbs, while Heist watches. Sasha walks away with a little smirk, totally sure that he's going to pull this off. He can totally feel her confidence, even though she doesn't say a word. He grips the paper. By the next day, he finally reaches the wetlands. He climbs over a hill and just stops dead in his. He steps into the massive field of flowers to start gathering herbs. But then he realizes his whole team is totally gone. Even though he's stuck doing all the work alone, he's actually feeling super grateful, looking up with a real smile because he knows. He looks back as a massive shadow suddenly swallows the field of white herbs, making him wonder what on earth could be that huge. His eyes go wide with pure terror as a massive dragon standing on 2 legs towers over him, covered in dark, jagged scales and sharp. He's frozen solid, staring up with his jaw on the floor at the massive beast that just popped up in this quiet field. The monster lets out a massive roar, and he totally panics when he realizes the thick field. He screams his head off as the dragon lunges forward, its massive body completely blocking out the sky. That hit sends him flying through the air until he slams into the rocks, knocking the high above the action. Reynolds watches with an icy stare, wondering why Sasha even sent Heist. Covered in blood and totally beaten, Heist sees Sasha's smile flash through his head as he lies before the monster, losing all hope, and the dragon roars, ready to finish him off, but he just grits his teeth, and he's totally locked in and refuses to go down. So his eye starts glowing right before a mass light swirls in his hands and turns into a metal M79 grenade launcher, and suddenly he just knows exactly how to use this insane. That dragon screams at the top of its lungs and charges right at him. Suddenly, his instincts kick in, and he knows exactly what to do. He pushes past the fear, grabs that massive weapon to take aim, and tells himself he's totally got this. The monster jumps right at him and leaves itself wide open, so he pulls the trigger and sends a shot straight down the dragon's throat. A massive explosion rips the dragon's head apart from the inside, and the shockwave is so strong it sends. After the fight, his weapon starts crumbling into glowing dust, and when he checks his weapon master book, he looks totally freaked out, wondering if this insane. As the rush wears off, the fact that he's alive finally hits him, and he drops to the ground, crying before his sobs turn into a totally insane. Even though he's totally falling apart, he remembers Sasha's sweet. That memory snaps him out of his panic and turns it into pure, icy rage. Back at the guild hall, Master Geist watches from his office as he congratulates Reynolds and Piazzolla for finally hitting A rank. While Reynolds shouts his thanks, he takes a sip of his drink and casually brings up highs, mentioning some creepy rumors he's heard. While Piazzolla stands by Sasha and asks, he keeps going, explaining that the rumors are actually insane. Not only did they ditch the kid, but they were actually planning to hurt him. And now everyone Piazzolla is totally shocked and asks if he really thinks they do something that messed up. But he leans in and gets serious, explaining that as they get more famous, the gossip is only going to get worse. So he totally gets why they want to ditch the kid. Sasha gives him a confused look, so he explains that the kid is still chasing that old dream they all had. He takes another sip and asks if they remember the spot, reminding them it's out toward the Desara Desert. Suddenly, he totally loses it, slamming his cup down and yelling to know if they're messing with him about the wetland. He drops the ultimate bombshell that an SS+ rank black dragon lives in those wetlands. And just as he jumps into action, ordering Sasha and her whole squad to get down to the main hall right now. And the guild hall is going absolutely wild downstairs. And the sacred part, he glares at his old friends with pure rage, asking if they really hate him enough to try and kill him. Sasha is totally lost and asks what he's talking about, but he shuts her down, calling her a liar as he points at the map. He screams at the top of his lungs that he's finally had enough. This betrayal was the absolute final straw for him. With fire in his eyes, before he can even make his move, a sudden blast sends a guild member flying across the room. Heist gets slammed down next, crashing hard. 2 years later, Heist is at a local inn, tossing coins on the counter and telling the owner he's moving in for the next month. The old man tells him he's way too high rank for this trashy place now, but Heist just gets teary. He thinks it's wild that nobody would ever guess an S rank is hiding out here, especially since he's officially known as Heist, the harbinger of darkness. Somewhere else, Sasha's checking the news and sees that Brynhild Valkyrie finally hit S rank. He shifts his focus and steps out onto the high stairs with a super intense look in his eyes. Heist gets called to the Merchant Guild by the big boss, Guys, an S-rank legend known as the strongest hand-to-hand fighter around. Guys brings up how Heist soloed a massive S-plus rank Mithril Ogre and tries to take all the credit for training him. But Heist, these monsters are ranked from a weak F all the way to SSSS, but a beast that powerful has never actually been found. Heist stands in front of a massive mountain of monster loot, while Geist points out they could have gotten even more if he was careful. Switching gears, Guy hands him a wax-sealed envelope and explains it's an invite to the S-rank. He watched Heist check out the letter's royal seal, and when the guildmaster asked if the royals were funding the job, High thought the whole thing was way too extra, remembering how the first king actually invented the idea of an adventurer king and was the world's very first. The guildmaster got super serious because the royals were finally about to name him a legit S-rank adventurer. The heirs to the throne were watching his. While he's still reeling, Geist drops a huge bombshell that Sasha is there too, and High Size freaks out the moment he feels her. His face went totally cold as he gripped his metal fist, turning back to Geist and asking how he could ever forget what went down. Guys coolly said he'd already warned Sasha about Heist plenty of times. This triggered a super painful memory for Heist. He remembered Sasha standing with. Heist's vibe suddenly went cold as he just accepted the truth. He didn't even care, saying it's totally normal for the weak to get left. He looked the guildmaster right in the eyes and told him straight up that he's never giving up on his goal to get stronger. He was only pushing forward because he was fueled by pure hate, and every time the word comrades popped into his head, he just laughed it off. Highs finished talking and marched out of the room, leaving Guys. Fast forward a few months, and Sasha and Heist are standing in the royal palace with their heads bowed as an official calls out their names. Sitting high on his throne, King Barbaros of Highbelk speaks up and announces that he's personally going to handle their final S-rank. Watching everything go down from the sidelines are two young royals, Cress and Yuanyi. Prince Cress steps up to announce the first mission, telling Sasha the kingdom wants her to take out a crystal golem in the mine. Sasha accepts and says it's a total honor, but then Nguyen steps up and excitedly hands Heist a document, telling him it's finally his turn. He's heading east to Philia, straight into the Gagazia sacred forest deep inside the Adora kingdom. The girl is actually First Princess Maine, and she flashes a huge grin as she announces she's joining Heist's quest, leaving him totally speechless as he tries to argue back. He shuts her down instantly, telling her there's no way she's coming, which leaves the princess totally stunned in front of the whole court. Mwain demands to know why, arguing that he'd totally nail the S-rank mission with her help, but she asks if he's even thinking about his team. Heist totally brushes her off and tells the king the mission is way too dangerous, so he's going in solo and asks for his blessing while Sasha watches him looking super worried. King Barbaro isn't even mad about the disrespect. He just starts laughing like a maniac, shaking his whole body while his guards stand there looking. He stops laughing and gets dead serious, telling the young adventurer that even though this is totally new, it's the royal family. He keeps talking, saying he's heard all the legends about how this guy crushes SRAN missions and always handles the fight totally solo. Before the king can even finish, Princess Mwan jumps in to beg her dad, but the princess puffs out her cheeks in a huge pout, totally annoyed that she's getting left behind after all. Now that everything's finally sorted out, King Barbaros slams his hands together and officially calls an end to the ceremony. With the boring official stuff finally over, the vibe gets way more chill as servants start bringing out. During the feast, King Barbaros laughs like a maniac and toasts to Geis's death, mocking Heiss's insane guts, while later, the king catches some guys staring out a window at Heiss standing all alone in the courtyard, and he admits he should have told the guildmaster sooner. Inside, at the banquet, things get super awkward as Princess Mian keeps trying to feed Sasha. She begs Sasha to let her join the mission, introducing herself as Princess Mian and making it clear she's definitely. Reynolds starts yelling that royals aren't allowed to do that. Piazzolla is super annoyed their first trip is getting ruined, and Sasha just stands. Mwain is absolutely beaming now that her request is a go, calling Sasha darling. A bit later, the bigger squad treks through a sunny forest, and the camera zooms right in on his eyes, showing he's totally locked in. Under the glowing moon and a sky full of stars, he stands all alone and squeezes his gloved fist, ready to take on this challenge by himself. A familiar voice snaps him out of his thoughts, and Heiss turns to see the guildmaster, Guy. The guildmaster gives him a hard time, saying that blowing off the royal guards was a total slap in the face to the Guy's vibe totally changes as he ruffles Heist's hair, telling him to be polite, and getting all serious again. The guildmaster looks Heist straight in the eye and asks what his big plan is. Heist takes a second to process everything, realizing he's got the sage's legacy, but still hasn't finished reading that mysterious old book. Guildmaster Geis gives him one last warning to watch his back, so he says a quick goodbye and heads out under the crescent moon as the massive guild gate. He walks through the massive stone gates all by himself, heading straight out into the dark night. He barely gets moving before a voice shouts his name, and when he spins around, he sees Sasha standing there, looking dead serious. She asks for a second to talk, but he totally shuts her down, asking what they'd even discuss. He just scoffs at her apology, tells her to cut the crap, and turns his back on her again. He finally snaps and spins around, screaming at her for acting so nice all of a sudden, pointing at his bandaged eye and yelling. He stomps off again, so Sasha chases him down and shouts his name, but she loses her nerve the second she mentions the flowers. What she says reminds him of the mission they did together, and it's clear that whole thing ended in a total disaster. He shuts her down with a sarcastic tone, asking what she's even apologizing for when he knows she never. He glares at her with cold, hurting eyes and tells her she's got no soul, hitting Sasha so hard that her eyes fill with tears as she whispers his name. He snaps around and ditches her so fast that Sasha reaches out, but her hand just catches thin air where he used to be. Rain starts pouring down as she grabs his hand, her voice shaking while she says sorry and admits she was just. Her face softens into a hopeful smile as she begs him to understand, reminding him that she promised to. Her begging just makes him even angrier, so he yanks his hand away. He swears he's going to get strong his own way from now on, and as his cold words hit her like a punch, a single tear, he starts getting superheated, demanding to know her good reason. After finishing his speech, he tells her to keep trying to be the strongest, but adds that even if he was powerful, he'd never dump a weak. He stops one last time without even looking back, telling her his life is totally ruined and that the eternal moon is one of the rarest herbs in the world. Legend says this super rare herb only grows at the very top of Mount Gagazia, a peak hidden deep inside the ignorant kingdom's forests. Hai sits in his room checking his gear, looking at his armor made of old dragon skin, his tiny storage ring. Now that he's all geared up, he hits the Merchants Guild and tosses his S-rank card on the counter. The guild lady smiles and tells him the boss is busy with Sasha, so he says he'll wait and heads to the quest board to to look for some high-rank herb. As he's checking out the job board, a girl asks him, "What's wrong?" And he looks up to see an elf with pointy ears he brushes it off and says, "It's nothing." But the elf keeps giving him a major side-eye like she doesn't believe him. They're talking right in front of the guild's super busy quest board, which is totally covered in bounty posters, and she cuts through the silence to ask if elves are super rare, and he turns back to tell her that, yeah, they basically are. He explains that elves almost never leave the Ghidorah region, and looking at the map, Highbelk is so far. He watches from nearby as a B-rank adventurer named Persia shows her ID to Piazzolla, he walks up and tells Piazzolla he's never met anyone so strong on their own, but she just flips the script and asks why. He just flashes his own card, and Piazzolla's jaw hits the floor when she sees he's actually an S rank. While they stood at the quest board, he admitted it's super rare for an S rank to go solo, but just hearing the name Idora made him totally snap. He got right in her face and growled that it was none of her business. But before he could do anything, he realized he'd gone too far, so he quickly played it cool and told the Stundle he was out of there. Across the guild hall, Sasha starts talking to someone hidden from view, guessing they're also there to see the boss about that massive quest, the king. She was actually talking to Heiss, but he just brushed right past her without saying a word, keeping a totally blank face as she looked super worried as he walked past, while Piazzolla stood nearby, catching every second of their silent moment. He walks into the guildmaster's office and sees a bunch of guards standing around a massive buff dude. The guildmaster looks Heist. He listened as the guildmaster broke down their target. Clan Idrisil was mostly made up of demi-humans, and their leader was the legend. The guildmaster explained that clan was the wrong word, because they're actually a massive group protecting tons of. After finishing the explanation, they handed Heist a tiny sealed package, and he just stared at it, wondering what was inside. He explained it was a recommendation letter for the Yggdrasil Guild, and Geist bragged that after 40 years in the game, his Heiss shoved the letter aside and shouted his goodbye from the high window as Geist watched, telling him to watch his back. He walked right through those massive stone gates, leaving the crowded city behind to hit the open road. Suddenly, a flash of light caught his eye, and he instantly whipped out a weird-looking gun, clicking it ready as he shouted to find out who. He fired off a massive energy blast as a warning and yelled that the next one would definitely draw blood. But then an elf archer pops out from behind a tree and admits she got caught. But when Heist asks what she's doing and she tries to ask for a favor, he just shuts. She wouldn't back down, explaining she was heading to Gagazia too, and since they were going the same way, she dared him to give her one good reason why she couldn't just. He glares at the elf, demanding to know why her drama is his problem. From her sickbed, she explains that sticking with him is a total pro move, since the Ghidorah kingdom is backing. He's standing in an open field now, totally shocked, and asking how she knows so much. She looks totally desperate as she clenches her fist, begging him to let her. He thinks about her deal, so she offers a star contract, where he gets all the cash if she finds the herb, but if she dies, he can just ditch her body. She's staring them down with ice-cold eyes, making it clear she'll do whatever. He finally gives in and lets them tag along, but his hand starts sparking with. He lays down the law, telling her she has to survive on her own, and they are definitely not friends. With the deal finally set, he turns to walk away, but stops after a few steps. She looks up with a little smile, confirming her name, and then she makes sure his name is Heiss. Right as they head out, a massive bang rings through the woods and a goblin's. The explosion came from a weird metal weapon in the thief's hands, and while Perseus thinks it looks totally cursed, she explains her divine. She looks over at the tiny fairy floating next to her, which is actually the blessing itself. Her questions send him deep into his own head, and he just lets out a tired sigh, because even though his weapon master his skill lets him pull out a crazy stash of weapons, like an M79 grenade launcher, a Winchester 1873, a Benelli Nova, and a desert. He explains that he's the only one who can use these weapons, and the second Perseus tries to touch his massive bag, it vanishes into thin air. He sets up a super high-end camp in a clearing and starts cooking, while Perseus watches in total shock at how awesome and unique his gear is. He finishes cooking and hands her a tray with a massive sandwich and some soup, and she's shocked because the ingredients are way better. She stops and reminds him they aren't actually on the same team, but without even looking back, she takes a tiny sip of the soup and her eyes go wide because it tastes amazing. And while she's totally shocked by his skill, once she finishes every last bite, Perseus puts down her empty bowl and says thanks. She keeps staring at him like she's super grateful, and when he catches her looking, he asks what's on her mind. She admits she's super grateful and totally misjudged him as a cold-hearted guy, leaving him so stunned that all he can manage is a confused, huh? Persia gets real and explains the true reason she's so thankful is that this journey is her only shot at saving her sister. While the fire pops nearby, she tells him to get some shut-eye and promises the spirits will keep them safe. After thanking him for the order, just as they're starting to relax, a weird rustle comes from the trees, and Heist's jaw drops as he points up and yells, "What?" Towering over the whole land is this massive ancient tree reaching for the sky, and it's the legendary. Chrysia breaks down the tree's epic backstory, revealing that a legendary sage named Ibis used him. So what's the deal with these 4 massive clans? Each one rules a different kingdom, and together they basically run the entire world. So here are the 4 big powers of this world. First is Yggdrasil, where the elves live. Then up north, you've got the Holy Knights of Safford, who only Heisenprasia finally hits the Ghidorah Kingdom's gate at the base of a massive tree, but an elf guard stops them cold, showing his face gets totally serious as he thinks it over, and he makes it super clear that the girl is part of the deal too. She's hiding behind him and peeking out from her cloak, and when he asks what's up, she just whispers for him to ignore her. Heist hands the guard a merchant letter and a coin, but while the guard is still looking at them in shock, the elder turns to Heist, says sorry for the wait, and calls him out as one of Geist's guys. Before Heist, he looks back and tells Perseus to stay put, but he's totally suspicious about how fast the elves change their attitude just because of a single letter from Geist. The elder calls him over, but Persia tells him not to sweat it because Sage Ibis has way more power than even the Ghidorah royals, which totally blow. He follows the old man deep into the tree until they reach a massive gated machine built right into the wood. And when he asks what it is, the lift glides up and dings as it stops. Then the gates slide open to reveal a massive city built right into the giant tree branches as the old man tells them that they're looking at a massive, sunny staircase leading to a giant shrine. And the old man explains it's the home of the legendary sage Ibis, the leader of. With a sharp snap, the fancy sliding doors fly right open. Heiss and his old elf guide step into a massive room, and right in front of them, a mysterious person. She looks back with a pipe at her lips and just gives a chill hello. She spins around to reveal she's actually Ibis, the big boss of the Yggdrasil clan. She holds up a letter to show she read Geist's message and says the old man wants her to help Heist out. She starts cracking up, saying the request is totally random, but she'll do it just to be nice. She stops playing around and gets serious as she leans in, instantly smelling the gunpowder on him. Heist takes his chance and whips out that mysterious book, asking the clan master if she's got any leads on it. Ibis grabs the book and stares at the cover, looking totally shocked by the coincidence. Ibis looks down at the open pages and drops a total bombshell. This is actually Nabunaga's secret diary. She looks up from the diary in total shock, flipping through the pages as she asks Heiss who he really is, convinced he's from another world. She's super confused about how an outsider can read their books, but Heiss admits her black-tipped fingers touch the page and she suddenly freezes, realizing she can actually read. She gets this wicked grin on her face, and since she's totally into this, she tells Heiss to sit down. He starts reading a part where Nabunaga calls Ibis acutely. She finally hits her limit and snatches the book back, telling him they're done for now. But she moves so far. Standing out on the Gagazia mountainside, he looks at the diary and realizes how crazy it is. He's just walking when the ground suddenly shakes and explodes, and this massive the beast slams its huge body down, launching Pretya into the air with a scream. While Heiss just clicks his tongue, he charges straight at the monster. His gauntlet starts glowing, and he lets loose a crazy barrage of blasts that explode right against the beast. His strike hit the mark and dropped the giant worm, leaving Pretya totally speechless as the massive beast crashed down, and the monster twitched and started to vanish into thin air. So he looked at the fading mark on his glove and warned her to stay sharp, because that thing was probably hunting them by their sin. She looked at him totally confused but thankful, asking why he'd even save her since they aren't on the same team. But he just looked away and said he told her he didn't have to help, but since her goal was the same as that other girl's, he gave Pretya a super awkward. Her serious face totally melted into a sweet smile, and she didn't even care about his excuses. She just thanked him, which caught him so. As they kept moving, Priscilla spotted a dragon hunting against the moon and told he was getting seriously stressed, telling her to hurry up and get back the second she grabbed the item. He was totally right to be worried, because the ground suddenly exploded with more of those gross worm monsters, and he grit. Priscilla totally ignored the new swarm of monsters and charged straight ahead until she finally reached the clearing, tightly gripping that tiny bottle in her hand. She's looking everywhere like crazy, but her hope turns into pure panic when she sees nothing. She drops to her knees, totally heartbroken. Just when they lose all hope, a massive roar shakes the entire ground. This huge Pretya the elf archer stands her ground against a massive gross toad that she thinks she can finally get away if she lands one massive hit. So she pulls back her bow as a wild swirl of magic starts charging up. The magic arrow flies straight and smacks the monster right in the head, but the beast doesn't even flinch. Priscilla is totally stunned when she realizes that weak attack, does absolutely nothing, and the giant toad lets out a massive roar that shakes the whole ground, making that monster's gross sticky tongue lashes out super fast, wrapping around her waist and snatching her into the air before the creature slams her into the ground with a massive thud, letting out a victory roar while its tongue keeps squeezing her tight. Out of nowhere, a voice screams through the noise as High appears right in front of her, his left eye totally trashed and bleeding. He whips out his gun and starts blasting, but the bullets just bounce right off the monster's thick skin, and he realizes he doesn't even flinch, quickly swapping his small gun for he jams a glowing vial into the chamber, gives the gun a quick spin, and aims it. He pulled the trigger, and a massive boom shook the night as his superpowered shot slammed right into the giant toad's head. The monster went flying from the hit and crashed down dead, so Heist took a breath to make sure. Once she got over the shock, she looked at him super worried and asked why he was even there when he stayed quiet. And that's when it finally clicked. They couldn't take their eyes off the Veen Noyet Dan flower as it started to shrivel up, and its glow completely died out right in front of them. Priscilla figured it out instantly. The dragon's blood was rotting everything, and she just stood there in total shock, looking at the dead fields. She started to panic and told Heist they were almost out of time, pointing toward a spot way off in the distance. She was sprinting through the field like crazy, grabbing flowers as fast as she could. Suddenly, a massive flash of light. She carefully tucked the glowing flower into a glass jar and twisted the lid shut to keep that light shining. Snapping back to the moment, she held out a sealed jar with a huge grin, telling him the dragon was finally toast, and she tells him he has to take the gift, saying she'll just find what she needs somewhere else, leaving Heist totally speechless and worried as he grips the glowing. Before he can even say a word, a voice yells from the bottom of the mountain, and a young elf comes sprinting up, looking totally freaked out as he calls for Princess Prasya. He rushes up and grabs High's shoulder, sounding totally relieved but also super annoyed as he tells them the princess vanished and only he stares Highs down, asking if he's really the S-class adventurer who guarded the princess on her trip. He stays totally quiet while the worker spills the secret of who the princess really is. It turns out Prasya is totally livid and snaps at him, asking if he really expected her to just ditch her sister and let her die. But the guy just looks away and mumbles that it's probably just. She clenches her fist with total determination, but the attendant keeps nagging her. Once the talk gets all royal and serious, Heist decides he's done, gives Priscilla a quick pat on the shoulder, and just walks away. Back at the Ghidorah Palace, Perseo is totally breaking down in Queen Alsara's arms, sobbing that her mission was a total fail. She tells her little sister it's okay and that maybe this was just destiny playing out. The queen explains. Priscilla hands a little gift to her sister, Queen Alsara, who's inside the glass jar is the Vin Noyer Dan flower, and she starts. A few days later, Heist is back at the guild drinking alone when the clerk calls him out for failing yet another mission. The guy is losing his mind because Heist somehow messed up an easy mission to guard the princess and then actually turned down the money. Switching things up, the guild official hands Heist a brand new mission to go explore a mysterious dungeon that was just discovered. Just as he's about to head out, a voice calls his name, and High freezes when he sees Princess Prasya standing in the doorway. Just seeing her there proves she actually made it. And since that flower medicine worked like a charm, Queen. Back in the present, Heist looks totally fed up as he asks her what she wants from him this time. She explains that since the queen is finally healed, she's got the green light to keep traveling and really wants to pay him back for everything he did. Ernest is super determined and offers to be his partner, but Heist is so shocked he literally jumps back and shuts her down instantly. He shuts her down hard, but the elf princess isn't giving up that easily. She just watches him and lets out a little laugh, like she's got a secret. He turns his back and starts walking away, his footsteps echoing, but she shouts one last time. Her words spark a memory from a few days ago when his new squad was walking through. He can still see every single one of their faces: Sasha, Reynolds, Robin, Piazzolla, Typhoon, Prince Cress, and Princess Muan. Sasha stares down the dark mine tunnel with fire in her eyes, knowing they need a perfect team combo and a solid plan before they reach the very end. Prince Crest steps up to break down the plan, showing off his duplication power by pointing at two identical Sashas who are ready for action. He keeps laying out the plan, saying that once his power is live, Robin's going to fight. With the plan ready to go, Sasha tells the squad she's got full faith in them and will jump in for the final blow once they're set, while Reynolds, Robin, she turns her focus to the royal siblings, asking Prince Cress and Princess Nguyen if they're ready to step up and pull off their part of the plan. Cress and Muain shout out at the exact same time, looking totally fired up and ready to jump straight into the fight. Everyone's fired up and ready, so Sasha shouts that it's time and leads the whole group straight into the massive entrance of the mine. The group walks into a massive cave filled with glowing crystals that look absolutely insane. Sasha's hyped about the magical view, but Heiss is totally zoned out, remembering that the quarry is supposed to be even more insane, and he's snapped out of his head when Princess Muin screams for everyone to stop because a giant monster made of jagged rocks and crystal. Robin scopes out the crystal mine from a high spot and tells the group she sees 7 golems with 5. While she talks, Heiss realizes these things move so weirdly. Reynolds cuts him off and asks Sasha for the plan, pointing out that these ore monsters shouldn't be this smart. She tells everyone they're sticking to the plan, puts her hand on Prince Cress's shoulder, and orders. Out of nowhere, a perfect clone of Sasha appears right next to her, making Robin yell that Robin's arrow starts glowing with power as she pulls back her bow. She fires off her magic arrows, and they zoom across the field to slam into the small golems, blowing up. Now that the small fry are gone, the two Sashas charge forward together and leap into the air, swinging their glowing blades They strike together and tear right through the 2 giant golems, shattering their crystal. Once the dust clears, Sasha casually says the monsters are totally toast. She stares into the pitch-black mine and gets a bad feeling that something super sketchy is definitely. Her brother, Prince Cress, notices she's stressed and asks if she's joking, but she tells him it's dead serious because that crystal golem was weighed. His face drops as it finally hits him. They've been spotted. He steps up like a total boss, his voice booming as he tells the whole squad to stay sharp because one wrong. He gives the word, and the group heads into a massive underground crystal workshop. A guy, chilling on a pile of rubble in the shadows, starts talking about the cute white-haired girl, and when Sasha asks who he is, the horned dude, that name sends a total shockwave through him, and he repeats Demon Clan in pure disbelief, remembering them as the terrifying race that once tried to rule. The world is split right down the middle between humans and demons, and even though one hero stopped a massive invasion, the land was left totally broken. Now, the ground they're standing on is... In a total blur, Crane suddenly pops up behind the group with scary speed, mocking them for somehow jumping between worlds and even asking. He shows up out of nowhere with a creepy warning, and suddenly crazy robberies start breaking out everywhere. This old map shows just how insane the wars used to be, with thousands of soldiers. The demon Crane just strolls away laughing, making fun of Heist's grit. He's holding onto that glowing crystal from the workshop when Sasha corners him, sounding super suspicious as he brushes off their boring talk and tells them that if they're gonna hype him up, they better show some real energy. While a quick breeze ruffles, he cracks up at how polite I'm being and tells me to just chill out, acting totally friendly even though the whole situation is super. His smile vanishes in a heartbeat as Sasha suddenly pops up right behind him with her sword glowing, and Crane is totally stunned. Her sudden attack leaves her friends in total shock. High screams her name in a panic, while the whole team gets hit with a massive power boost. And Crane just gives a cocky smirk because the real fight is finally starting. He totally mocks their 3 buff spells, but then a massive wind blast slams him into the cave wall, and as Sasha screams his name, he vanishes and instantly teleports right in front of Sasha with his fist cocked. She's staring down the demon Crane, who's just looming over her with a creepy smirk. He starts trash-talking, asking if she's scared yet, while his power, he floats high into the air inside a massive storm of wreckage, looking down at the group like they're just annoying flies and offering to finally end their life. Sasha didn't back down for a second, telling Crane that even though he's a beast of a demon, suddenly a ton of shots slammed into him and exploded, making him spin around to scream at whoever was. He finally spots the guy responsible, Philip, who's totally out of breath from using his staff, and the demon is straight up shocked that a little brat just tossed him around. He didn't even have time to move before a bunch of super fast shots slammed into him and blew up in a massive fireball, but then a calm voice from the smoke asked if, when the dust finally clears, the whole squad, Heiss, Reynolds, Philip, Piazzolla, and Robin, are standing safe, but Piazzolla the elf floated over with a cocky smirk, telling him that one tree doesn't make a forest. Right as Piazzolla finished the proverb about 3 trees making a mountain, Sasha lunged forward with her glowing sword and caught the demon totally off guard. She rips her blade right through his chest, sending Crane stumbling back as he gasps in total shock. Sasha stands over him after Sasha watches the demon Crane go totally ballistic, screaming that he's going to hunt down every. After dropping that threat, he vanishes in a massive burst of speed, leaving the ground cracked and the air shaking behind him. The demon vanishes into thin air, but Sasha stays completely still, tracking his invisible movement with her eyes. Things are getting crazy at the Grand Habel Palace, as everyone wonders if the demon gods inside the throne room. Princess Muain tells King Barbaros that a guy named Crane is officially her brother, Prince Cress, jumps in and says he'll hear the report from her himself. And while Muain thanks the king, Barbaros gets a sharp look. He turns to the legendary group, gives them props for their massive win, and tells them he'll grant them any one wish they want. Sasha steps up with her eyes wide in total shock and hope, asking for a private base for the sacred party, and it looks like this reward is all thanks to a massive party, where Reynolds, Heiss, Sasha, Piazzolla, and back in the throne room, Bonet gives Sasha a warm smile and says she totally earned that reward. But then his face gets serious as he asks why the heist was a total disaster. The mystery is real, but he should actually pulled it off and brought back that rare Vin Noyet Dan flower. This flower is a total lifesaver because it's the only thing that can cure Queen Alsura, who's currently stuck in bed and super sick. Heiss ditched his duties because she was in such bad shape, and he actually gave that life-saving flower to the Queen's little sister, Prussia. Crane points his finger right at Heiss, telling him that even though he blew the mission, saving the Ghidorah royals was a massive win. And even though the king pardoned him, Heiss actually turned it down, making Crane so mad his fist starts shaking. Meanwhile, Bonet is talking to Sasha, while a super hyped-up Piazzolla asks what Procea. Bonet reveals that Prezia ditched Ghidorah to become an adventurer, and he's pretty sure she's traveling with Heiss right now, as we see a shot of the two. Piazzolla flips out and screams, asking why Prussia would ever team up with a bunch of thieves, while Sasha stays quiet. Her friend's freakout isn't helping her think straight, and Sasha looks down, wondering if Heiss is seriously planning to start a new team with the elf prince. Back at the guild hall, Heist is sitting with Guildmaster Geist, who totally catches him off guard by asking if he's on a break. He's told his dungeon job is officially over, so Geist hands him a legendary S-rank card, since only the pros can go past floor 60. Once the serious stuff is done, Geist tells Heiss to just chill and enjoy being a teenager, but then Piazzolla jumps in to ask if he's totally lost, until Perseus suddenly gets right in his face with a massive grin, asking if he's still trying to ditch her. Heist is so caught off guard. Once the chaos dies down, Geist puts a hand on Heiss's shoulder and tells him with a serious, but he spots a flyer for the big old book fair in Habok's reusing district and figures it's the perfect chance to hunt for rare books. And just as he's thinking it over, Procea pops up and asks if he's hitting the fair. Then they finally hit the super busy Old Market district, and Priscilla just smiles because suddenly a bookstore catches his eye with a sign promising tons of books, so he decides to head inside and see what's up. He steps inside and is totally blown away by the massive walls of books stretching from the floor all the way to the ceiling. His eyes land on a book sitting on the table, and it's actually the adventure diary of the S-rank legend, Gerald. He's never heard of this Gerald guy, so he'll ask the guild about him later. But right now, he's too curious, and right as his metal fingers are about to snatch that spine, another hand reaches out and softly touches his. He spins around and is totally shocked to see Sasha right there, and while she starts to apologize, she completely freezes the second Things get way more awkward when the rest of the sacred party suddenly crashes the scene. Reynolds immediately demands to know. He stops dead when he sees Reynolds laughing and messing around with Piazzolla in a headlock, and even though Piazzolla is screaming that they aren't a couple, the book slips right out of his hand and hits the floor as a voice he knows calls out his name, Heiss. He looks up to see Sasha asking if he's picking fights again, while Piazzolla finally breaks free from Reynolds and suggests he suddenly turns his back on them, says he's out of there, and just walks away while Reynolds and Piazzolla watch him go. They grab a seat at a cafe where Priscilla asks if that girl was Sasha. She keeps pushing and brings up that Sasha was his childhood friend, but Heist gets totally annoyed and says that was just some. Chrissy's expression softens as she tells him to stop lying to himself, asking if he actually loved Sasha or if she was. One more check on one line in equals one line out. If the input is 1, her tone shifts. 2. She reminds him. His face twists in pure pain as he asks how he's ever supposed to go back to normal, and the whole room just goes dead silent. Priscilla stares him down from across the table and tells him straight up that there's no going back. Then, as he's lost in thought, she hits him with all he could do was stand there and watch as the whole place exploded into a total war zone. This guy with horns named Crane, the horned warrior, glared at them with a terrifying look, his voice sounding super low. He snaps his fingers, and a massive stone beast appears out of thin air. But Heist just smirked. Before Heist could even make a move, the stone monster was totally blown away, its head turning straight into dust. A month later at the guild hall, a maid is busy cleaning near a massive banner, while a newspaper nearby, while she's busy working, a door creaks open and she spins around to see Heiss looking totally wiped out. Before she can even say hello, a loud group nearby starts making a scene, and the maid turns to congratulate the 1,000 party. He leans in with a sneaky smirk, telling them they've been grinding just as hard since they joined the Sacred Guild. He's quick to give his whole squad the credit for the win, introducing his teammates, The serious, stoic Lauren is usually super proud, but he starts shouting in total Everyone reacts differently to his freak out. Tennessee is super worried. Matt thinks he's being way too loud. Koa reminds them that he grips his fist tight with fire in his eyes, yelling that this is his big chance to rocket straight to S rank. He's right in the middle of his big dramatic speech when Kwa grabs him and tells him to finally shut up. Suddenly, the maid's voice cuts through the noise to tell Heist he looks totally beat. Lauren stops Heist from backing away and pulls out this massive, freaky-looking weapon, explaining it's actually cursed with a soul trap. Lauren doesn't back down and shoves a gross monster head forward, shouting that it's a rare elven ingredient, while Lawrence's crew is standing there looking super embarrassed. But King Barbaros shuts everyone up to announce that this ingredient is actually part of a massive... We cut to a massive hall where King Barbaros stands with his kids and advisors, telling the crowd he's skipping the small talk to get straight. We see he's actually talking to the world's biggest powerhouses, including Chaos from the Judgment Tribe, the S-rank legend, Mamacha, and the barbarian leader, Jair Bas. The king explains that B-rank monsters and higher are multiplying like crazy, and it's getting totally out of control. The big meeting is going down at the Supreme Hell Floor near the capital, a place Heist already scoped out, and he's brought Sasha. Among the summoned heroes are the heavy hitters from the Sacred Guild. Heist the Beast Tamer, Sasha the White Heavenly Knight, and their boss, King Barbaros looks dead serious as he names this nightmare the Beast Stampede, leaving every warrior there absolutely shook and terrified. A Beast Stampede is basically a massive monster explosion where their numbers get so crazy that they swarm out to steal more land, leaving behind The king kept talking, laying out all the scary details of the disaster. He explained that a beast called the Storm Cannon, this was just a tiny sign of a way bigger disaster, because the dungeon's whole ecosystem was totally... These monsters weren't just wandering around for no reason. They were actually moving with a clear plan. If the guild's math is... This was totally insane, because even for a mid-level dungeon, there were a massive 20,000 monsters charging in that stampede. History shows just how bad this gets, because by the time the last stampede ended, 3 whole towns and 7 villages were completely... His face went totally serious as he thought about the past. He revealed that this is the 7th stampede to come straight from the Supreme Hell Floor. He even admitted he asked everyone to team up, but the vibes were totally off. Prince Cress looked away, annoyed. Mama Cha sighed like this was a total disaster. And the king got straight to the point by calling... He started barking orders, telling Geist to alert the guilds and ask other names. He finished his orders and slammed his hand on the table, telling everyone that this... He looked at every leader in the room with a super serious face and told them he was counting on them, sounding totally powerful. After the king's big announcement, Heist just stood there in silence with a fresh bandage and eye patch, while Sasha watched him with a super... The burly Jarabasan leader told the other bosses they had to team up for this massive threat, and Mama Cha backed him up, saying the rewards would be just as insane. Sasha had a way crazier plan. Instead of just playing defense, they should charge... Meanwhile, Chaos was trying to talk sense into Heist, asking how he even got promoted to S rank when his blessing... He stopped right at the doorway without even looking back and just said, sorry. His refusal made the other leaders absolutely lose it, with Jarabasan cursing his massive ego. When the news reached the throne, King Barbaros just burst out laughing. And even though Princess Muin was super annoyed, he told her Sasha wasn't feeling it at all, and she just stood there staring where Heist ran off, looking totally shocked and wondering why he'd ever make a crazy... 10 days went by, and the whole kingdom was in a panic as the news showed maps of the Beast Stampede closing in fast. As things got even crazier, the Merchants Guild officially shut down every single mission and job until further notice. Just like they thought, the total chaos was set to kick off in only a few days. With danger closing in, King Barbaros stepped onto the castle balcony and started shouting orders to his army of knights. His words didn't stop the panic at all, and soon everyone was totally freaking out. All over the country, people grabbed whatever they could. The streets turned into a total mess as everyone started running for their lives. But in the middle of all that madness, King Barbaros looked totally drained but ready to stand his ground, while Princess Mwain was clearly terrified for what might happen to their people. Meanwhile, Sasha stared out at the horizon, looking both ready for action and totally nervous about the massive fight. They're finally home, but that's exactly when the beast stampede kicks off. While the whole kingdom was freaking out about the attack, Heiss was just chilling in a quiet part of the shopkeeper just finished saying how lucky he was to live his dream in this spot, when a crazy loud roar from outside he held up a photo of his wife and smiling son, saying he was just lucky they weren't home when everything went down. He sounded totally defeated as he looked out over the wasteland, warning that the massive swarm coming wouldn't even leave a single bone behind to bear. Tears filled the old man's eyes as he said his home and family were all he had left. And since this inn was his family, Heist just listened in total silence, his face hidden behind his dark hair and a brand new eye patch. She spins toward the counter and drops some coins, while he tells the stunned shopkeeper that the money up on the city's massive outer wall. The scouts just realized how bad it really is. A terrifying army of 70,000 beasts. The guildmaster screamed out a massive number to hype up the defenders for their king. And right next to him, Sasha killed the fear by promising to be there. She was ready to scream back, but a scout's panicked report shut her up instantly. The original guess was way off. There were actually 100,000 of them coming. As the tension hit its peak, Heist stepped out into the empty streets with his coat blowing in the wind, looking straight ahead and ready to take on one line out. The input is 2 sentences in one block. He fires off 3 massive missiles that slam into the front lines and explode. He lets out a massive roar as his missile launcher vanishes, replaced by a giant rotary cannon that pulses with power. While he gets ready to blast away, he lets out a massive blast of fire, and the cannons rip right through the monster army, shredding them to pieces, while the loud explosions drown out their screams. Reynolds watches from a distance and can't believe how insane the view is. Right next to him, Sasha is totally shocked, wondering if out of nowhere, this creepy horned demon Crane pops up right in front of Sasha, laughing like a total psycho as he talks trash and says her whole... Crane looks back at the chaos and squints, wondering what kind of insane weapon is causing all this. He glares at the warrior in the distance, looking totally disgusted as he mutters a curse about that annoying brat. Reynolds takes charge and orders the front line forward, telling them he's counting on them as Sasha, Robin, the armored warrior, and Robin rushes in with a crazy roar, swinging her giant weapon down, and she grits her teeth, triggers her shrinking power, and tells her squad to just hang in there. Right away, a giant, one-eyed monster lets out a massive roar, and she dives straight into the chaos, swinging her sword. Jarbison slams his weapon down to trigger a massive earthquake, while nearby, suddenly, a massive explosion rips the ground apart. And as the smoke clears, the demon Crane, he gives a wicked smirk, realizing this is the guy from Sasha's reports, and asks Reynolds if he actually knows her. Crane doesn't even wait for an answer, asking what he wants before saying he's going to wipe him out. Then, that insult really pushed his buttons, and now Reynolds is charging the demon with a wild scream and a flashing sword. The demon vanishes into thin air, but then Crane suddenly appears right behind him, totally fine, while the forest behind them explodes and Sasha screams to warn Reynolds but her warning is totally drowned out. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking and splitting apart as a massive rock monster that looks like a literal mountain bursts out with a deafening roar. He watched as that massive rock monster went totally berserk, smashing the ground. The monster let out a massive roar that shook the whole field, and seeing the crazy, Sasha hears him shout and turns around with a look that says she means business. His laugh died instantly when Heiss suddenly appeared, and while Crane joked about him being asleep, he's desperately dodging those deadly shots as they zip past him, while Crane just floats there with a smug grin. The whole place went up in a massive explosion, and while Crane was busy bragging about his crazy magic, the smoke cleared to show Heist was totally fine. Now, rocking some epic dark armor, he's moving at insane speeds and weaving through every attack. Crane is shocked by how strong the magic is, but he knew he was dead meat if he didn't move fast. Then, it finally clicked. If he could just mess up the flow of those shots. During a quick breather, Sasha calls out from behind and puts a hand on his shoulder, telling him to stay cool because she's got his back. And then she suggests her words totally chilled him out, and he flashed a cocky grin as his gauntlet started to glow. He aims a massive double-barreled gun at the demon, his eyes popping out in total shock as he demands to know how Heist is pulling off this crazy. He pulls the trigger. Sasha steps up to charge this insane, glowing energy that mixes with the shot. The demon screams in pure shock, looking totally humiliated. He can't believe his own massive power was just used to take him. Everything goes dead quiet across the wrecked battlefield, leaving Heisen and Sasha as the only ones left standing. Suddenly, a cheerful voice breaks the silence as Piazzolla pops up with a massive grin, thanking Heis and teasing that he totally owes her. Before he can even say a word, his face drops in total shock, and he snaps his head around, screaming Sasha's name in a panic, which completely freaks out Piazzolla. He screams out for her, while somewhere else, Sasha is gasping for air with blood and dirt all over her face as that alarms start screaming across the whole battlefield as every single soldier and Sasha charges in and leaps high, slamming her sword onto the kickback sends her flying, and she's totally fuming because that monster's shell. She let her guard down for a split second and paid the price, especially since the Demon Emperor's arrival just turned. Rental sees her in trouble and starts tearing through those nasty goblins like a beast. He screams her name as a goblin lunges at her, but right before it can land a hit, its head totally explodes from an invisible strike. The piece is totally over because the giant Demon Emperor is charging up a massive beam right in its mouth. Reynolds looks at the monster lets out a massive roar and fires a huge blast of energy. The beam rips through the ground, burning up everything in its path. As the smoke clears, a figure stands over the fallen Sasha, and it's actually Heist, but he's all beat up and wearing a dark coat and an eye patch. He doesn't say a word, just standing there with his back turned like a total boss. He held Sasha close while she shook with relief and rage, screaming at him for almost dying when she never even asked for his protection. Totally wrecked and gasping for air, he just said his body moved on its own. Reynolds watched from the dirt, finally realizing they both just wanted to be pro-adventurers, and Sasha's face totally softened as he told her she still had a lot to learn, but he knew she just wanted him to succeed. and she was the real reason he kept pushing. He spotted the massive beast in the distance and told Sasha he'd handle the giant turtle while it let out a scary rumble. Sasha suddenly flashes back to when she was a kid and way too soft to kill a single shell. She remembered him smiling and saying she could do it, so seeing him beg her to run now, Sasha swung her sword in a blinding flash, releasing a massive energy wave that wiped out every goblin in sight, leaving Reynolds totally stunned. Her golden sword starts glowing like crazy as she remembers Jair Basin's words about unlocking her hidden power. And now Sasha is totally ready to protect High Bell. The monster is absolutely fuming, letting out an ear-splitting roar before it slams its head into the dirt to trigger its heavenly Fong move. Smashing as the enemy pushed forward, Sasha roared back, powering up and charging straight in. Her massive scream echoed across the battlefield and snapped him right out of his blackout. A sudden noise jolts him awake, and he finds himself in a bed with his face wrapped in bandages. But a woman's voice nearby confirms he's finally safe at an inn. He looks over to see Priscilla giving him a super cheerful good morning. He barely manages to whisper her name and asks how she even got. He didn't even care about his own safety, pushing himself up to ask what happened to Sasha right as Piazzolla walked through the door. The room went dead silent as the two elves just traded a super nervous look. Persia suddenly blurted out that she needed water and bailed with Piazzolla, leaving Heiss all alone and total. Just then, Piazzolla calls out from the window to check his wounds, saying they look painful but not too serious, and all Heiss. Then her voice got super serious, and she gave him a real apology straight from the heart. She explained that Sasha chose to join the fight herself, and while she spoke, Heisman kept seeing flashes of Sasha's crazy, awakened form. He gave a shaky smile and told Priscilla he finally reached his awakening, asking if he was finally done being a burden. She whipped her head up with a desperate look, knowing she was asking for a lot, and straight up asked him before he can even answer. Piazzolla slams the door open, and Heiss was totally lost when the fight suddenly broke out. But Priscilla, he was totally lost because he's always worked alone, and he had no clue why they were acting so jealous and fighting over him. The fight gets super intense as Piazzolla starts mocking Persea's relationship with Heiss, acting like she's already won, and then she drops a total bomb. A massive bang from outside suddenly cut through their arguing, and since Heiss was still stuck in bed, he looked over to see what all that noise. He dragged himself to the window to peek outside and realized that maybe things weren't so bad after all. Heiss finally saw who was making all that noise. Prosea and Piazzolla were down there. Fast forward 6 months, and the city is totally back in the swing of things, with the streets packed and full of life again. Over at the Sacred Guild Hall, Sasha meets a new squad called 1000, and while their leader is totally stuttering, she just apologizes for the hassle. She shows off a brand new C-rank quest to take down an ogre lord, and the spiky-haired leader is absolutely stunned. Sasha explains that since 1000 is C-rank now, it's time for a way harder mission, and when she asks if they're ready, but that confidence vanishes fast when the squad gets totally cornered in a clearing by 3 massive. His whole squad is beat up and scattered, so he grits his teeth to take on the fight alone. But as that massive beast charges straight at him, he realizes right when things look hopeless, this massive wave of dark energy explodes out of nowhere, totally dusting the monster and its whole squad. He turns to the beat-up adventurers to check if they're okay and notices Sasha, Then the whole 1,000 crew rushes him in tears. Just as they start to relax, one teammate looks at the dead orcs in total shock, realizing Heist must be. Lauren gets super hyped and brings up the rumor that Heist is the strongest S rank in the world. He just casually drops that he's going to conquer the 6 supreme dungeons, and the 1,000 party is totally losing it. These 6 spots are famous for being the hardest dungeons in the world, including the monster-filled Great Salt Lake of Pyloramans in Delmadrome and the Earth Dragons. The other legendary spots are the super confusing Forest of Confusion, the Tower of the 7 Sages, Grenobstar, which has only ever appeared once. He tells the squad that only 2 spots have been found, the Great Salt Lake and a desert dungeon, but warns them that nobody ever comes back alive. The 1,000 members are looking at him with total awe, but he knows he can't mention his secret mission yet, so his massive goals totally fire everyone up. So Lauren and Tenor, before he can even speak, we're suddenly in the king drops a massive order, telling Heist he has to conquer Delmadrome in the Desire region. One of the 6. His head is spinning because he's already being forced to dive into another insane dungeon way sooner than he expected. The king sees him hesitating and explains that after seeing Heist go beast mode during the stampede, he's totally sure he stood right in front of King Barbaros, who leaned in and asked him straight up if he was. He didn't even blink, dropping straight to one knee and slamming his metal fist onto the floor. With the order set, the king looked over at a massive stone tablet and told Heist to head to the Desire Adventurers Guild. The king said he already had a letter ready and expected some good news, so his advisor Bonnet handed it over while Heist took it, and with his business finished, Heist walked out of the throne room, and the massive gate slammed shut behind him, locking him. But as soon as he steps out, Piazzolla and Sasha are already waiting for him. Piazzolla pops up super hyped, saying she heard he's heading to He brushed past them and warned them to stay back, knowing this place was way too dangerous for anyone but him. She yelled for him to stay calm, and with a confident smirk, Piazzolla promised she wasn't going along with it. She stepped up and grabbed his arm, admitting that even with her new rank, she'd only slow him down, so Piazzolla let go of his arm and dropped one last bombshell. Sasha's squad is also gearing up to raid that. Just as Heist is heading out the city gates, Piazzolla yells his name to stop him, and he turns back. He's totally caught off guard by her thanking him, but then she flashes a huge smile and asks him to spill all the details about his trip when he returns, making him pause for a. She gives him a warm look and says he can spill all his stories while they grab some. With their goodbyes out of the way, the duo finally hits the road, praying for a. They arrive at the super busy desert kingdom of Pizaya, a city tucked right against some giant mountains, and Piazzolla heads inside and shows the guild official a letter from the king of Highbelk, telling them they're here to see Balgon and asking them to confirm. While she deals with the boring paperwork, Heist waits and squeezes his metal fist, thinking back to the letter, that crazy beast ride. Suddenly, a massive guy with a huge beard towers over him and shouts, asking if. Ice explains the king hired him to take down the dungeon, and he needs some intel, but Balgon just roars at him to get lost, calling him a brat who shouldn't eat. Balgon keeps talking trash, mocking the idea that King Barbaros would send an S-rank up. She tried to talk things out, but he just laughed in her face, mocking the legendary 4 great clans like their big title was a. He looked the big guy right in the face, and the young hero kept the insults flying, calling Balgoni and his whole squad a bunch of total cowards. Once he finished his rant, he pulled his dark visor down, turned away from the angry guy, and told the shopkeeper as he walks away. Piazzolla looks totally crushed, realizing right then that there's no way this ends peacefully. Balgon roared and called Heiss a little brat. Then Heiss suddenly dove off the balcony. He twists through the air with a grunt, barely dodging a massive hit that shatters the stone floor. He doesn't give the kid a second to breathe, lifting his giant weapon and yelling, "Dodge this!" as Balgon slams the hammer down with insane. The weapon slams down and the ground literally explodes, but Heist uses that force to flip right over Balgon's head, making the big guy smirk because he finally sees how good he skids to a stop and looks back at the total destruction, sweating bullets because the old man is way stronger than he expected. The shockwave keeps blasting outward, sending a massive cloud of dust and rocks flying all around the two fighters. Ball is out of the way, and everyone's shocked that Heist just appeared with a weapon. But when they ask if he's gonna quit, he just smirks. He's shocked to see the bullets just bounce right off Balgon's gauntlets, while the blacksmith doesn't even flinch. And Heist stares, realizes his attack. The bad guy just bursts out laughing and yells, "Gotcha!" totally loving the chaos, as he mentions how cool it is to see a Nabinaga weapon. That one word triggers a massive flashback of Ibis, her long hair blowing in the wind, as she looks back and asks. A heavy smack on the back snaps him out of it, and the blacksmith leans in with a massive grin. He smacked Heist on the shoulder with a loud thud, laughing his head off now that he finally remembered the kid's name. While Heist just stood there with the names finally picked out, he waved Heist over and told him to grab a seat because it was time for a story. Walking away, the guy looked super annoyed and wondered why the blacksmith hit him so freaking hard. He snapped out of it as they walked into what looked like a guild hall, and the blacksmith pointed to a table, telling him to sit. A second later, you could hear the sound of thick drinks splashing into wooden mugs. Balgon slides a mug over to Heiss and drops a massive secret. He used to be in a party with Nabionaga, which totally blows Heiss's mind. He told them that back at the very start, they were actually one big squad fighting for the... He laughed, thinking back to when Ibis, who's a total boss now, used to follow Nabinaga around like a little shadow while he was decked out. He stopped laughing and got dead serious, explaining that Nabinaga wasn't just some boss. He was his best friend and brother on the battle. He locks eyes with Heist and gets dead serious, asking why he's hating on someone for using the exact same weapon his best friend used to carry. He's caught totally off guard, but Balgon explains he's not just being a jerk. He points to a massive, reinforced bucket and shows. Balgon pulls out a massive, creepy monster skin and explains. With that dark memory finally out in the open, the bald guy asks him what his plan is, but the kid just stays quiet. He doesn't even wait for a reply since it's been way too long, mentioning that two other kids have... Thinking about his rivals gets Heist totally fired up, and he swears he's going so he can finally become... Balgone just laughs in his face and calls him a total idiot for ignoring his warnings. Balgon stops laughing and gets dead serious, seeing the kid really means business, so he decides to help by sharing everything he knows. He brings the kid inside and warns him that even though the Delmadrome looks like basic ruins, the monsters in there are actually He unrolls the scroll to show a map, and Balgon warns Heist that this place is nothing like a normal dungeon. The kid leans in to ask if those map drawings are the iron boxes, and Balgon... He thought about what the guy said, picturing those metal boxes, guns, and cars that looked just like his own gear. And even though he had no clue why they were in the dungeon, he was sure. He turned back to Balgon and asked if Nabinaga was also totally clueless about what those things were. And Balgon confirmed. Balgon finally finished spilling everything he knew, and as Heist gaze looked at his weapon master grimoire, he realized while Heist processes the news Valgan's fist clenches in rage as he admits that new info makes his friends' deaths feel totally pointless, leaving. He stared at the map, finally getting just how much Balgan had suffered. Finally seeing the truth, he looked Balgan in the eye and apologized for calling him a coward. The massive dude just gave a deep grunt to show he heard him. He told Heist to just drop it, glad the kid didn't act like some fake pro from the start. So Heist stepped back. Heist turned to leave with a cocky smirk, swearing he'd conquer the entire dungeon. But before he could even answer, the workshop door burst open and a visitor made the Heist and Balgan's chat gets cut short by a sudden noise at the door, and Heist looks dead serious as he turns to see who's crashing the party. Before he can even see who it is, a blur streaks right past him and heads straight for the back of the workshop. The new guy stops right in front of All Gone, and the massive craftsman doesn't even look surprised as he calmly asks, check the one line in equals one line out rule again. If the user provided multiple sentences in one block, I should probably output one single line. She whips around in a flash, getting right in Heist's face and shouting, "You're Heist, aren't you?" She circles him, checking him out from head to toe, and finally admits he looks pretty tough while he just stands there totally frozen. Balgan cuts right through the tension, waving a letter from Barbaros and dropping the bombshell that another S-rank adventurer is joining the team. Heist finally realizes what's happening and screams in total shock. He spins around to Balgan, totally losing it, and shouting that he never agreed to a partner, but Balgan just stays cool and tells him they're stuck together for this mission. Heist is sweating buckets as he looks back at the girl, wondering if he's really supposed to just agree to this. Higiri looks totally fed up. Snapping to clear the air, the hyped-up elf slams her card down, showing off her high rank and proving to everyone that she's the real deal. He's just standing there in total shock, mumbling about how she can't really be S-rank, while Balgan tells him he just needs to face the facts. He looks up as the elf reaches out with a huge smile and says her name is Higiri, so he's finally introduces himself back. A super-hyped girl named Higiri beams at Heist and tells him she's in his hands, then leans in, but he looks dead serious as he tells her straight up that she and Oolong are both gonna die. This totally stuns Higiri into silence. Then he asks where she gets her swagger back and brags about Oolong being her home, telling him to ignore his bad vibes so they can beat the dungeon and make up. But he pulls back, totally losing it, asking how this could even happen and insisting they have to beat it together. But Higiri is just confused. Back at the palace, King Barbaros drops a total bombshell by announcing he's actually joining the adventurers to raid the Great Delmadrome dungeon himself. While a court official doubts the story, the king asks if this is the same Heist from the legendary Bee Stampede incident, and Higiri's eyes go wide because she turns straight to the king and asks to join Heist's mission, arguing that since the pro-adventurers have been totally ruining the war, Heist screams for her to stop because he knows she's about to cause a total disaster. But Higiri, now that he's all alone, he's staring right at King Barbaros, who leans in close and asks Heist if he's ever been wrong. A heavy hand slams onto his shoulder as the king admits Heist has caught his eye. And as he gets ready to say it again, the young adventurer feels totally trapped. Higiri suddenly jumps out and slams a flag into the ground, announcing she's going to be the strongest by beating. Her eyes are glowing with total madness as she corners him, demanding to know if he's actually as strong as she thinks, while he just stares back with a stone-cold, serious face. He turns his back and totally blows her off, reminding her that he's a lone wolf and there's nothing left to talk about. Just as he starts walking away, a massive bearded guard gives him a friendly goodbye. But Hijiri isn't about to be ignored. The gatekeeper watches them head out, silently hoping they stay safe on their journey. Later, Highs hits up a crowded tavern and orders the waitress scribbles down his order as he adds some crispy fried fish. Then he turns to Higiri and asks how much longer she's gonna. She doesn't even blink, telling him she's sticking by his side until they clear the dungeon and he finally fights her. She's more fired up than ever and shouts that she's sticking with him, proposing they crush the dungeon together before they finally have their big duel. She's grinning ear to ear, totally proud of her genius plan, while Heist just slumps over, completely drained by her non-stop. A massive feast was laid out right in front of them, and the main dish smelled so good that Hajiri started shouting. She didn't waste a second, grabbing a massive wooden mug and spilling ale everywhere with a huge grin as she cheered for their brand new. She's cheering her head off, but Heist just takes a boring sip of his drink and hits her with a totally deadpan, "Oh, really?" He sets his drink down and tells her he doesn't remember making a team. But Hijiri, she completely ignored his whining and took a big bite, humming happily and saying this meal was just making her even more. Then she brought up their main goal, the Delmadrome Great Dungeon, explaining it's a legendary. Heist's face went totally serious when he heard the dungeon's rank, snapping back that S-class or not, you can die in a heartbeat in a place like. Higiri nodded along, knowing full well that as an S-class adventurer, she was already used to facing crazy, life-threatening dangers. Her smile completely vanished, and she got super serious, her eyes widening as she said she had to lock in and get her. She leaned in close and whispered with total intensity, telling the terrified Heist that she wasn't dying today. She grabs his collar with a wild, scary grin and reminds him that she's going to crush everyone to become the. Her words take him back to when he was a total beast, especially during the. Even after pulling off those insane moves, he realized that all that massive power didn't even feel heavy. Back at the tavern, he's totally zoned out, while Hijiri downs her drink and complains that he won't even think about competing, even though she looks down with tired eyes and quietly admits that these competitions are honestly just a huge. Her sudden honesty totally catches him off guard, so he looks her right in the eye. That one question sends his mind racing back to the past. He flashes back to her smiling and telling him to be the absolute strongest, but that memory gets totally wrecked when he sees her turning her back. Hijiri snaps him out of his head by leaning in close, telling him she doesn't care what his reason is. She just really wants him to spill his story. That one little request hits her way too hard, and suddenly she's sobbing and gasping for water before he even starts the story, leaving Heist He drops the serious talk since the whole vibe is completely ruined. They head straight into a super crowded town square where everyone's shouting and dodging through the market stalls. Heist realizes they're finally hitting the Delmadrome dungeon area, which looks way sketchier than any tourist. She turns to him and explains that this tourist spot is actually built on top of ancient ruins. Plus, she's got some serious work to take care of here. He asks her what she means, but then Hijiri suddenly realizes where they are and that they can head straight for the dungeon. She gets super hyped and challenges him to a race, shouting that the first one to the dungeon gets to be the. They finally arrive at a massive stone archway cut right into a mountain, and you can just feel the crazy power coming from the dark entrance.